Oh, yeah, he says.
Yeah, you're very bright. All right. Okay, welcome to H3. I am the acapellist, Alan Friesen, and with me is brother Scott Sweetman. Welcome to another fascinating episode of our program here. We hope that you're going to leave here with more hope, more happiness, more health. Something good happens for you. How's life, brother Scott?
Well, I've had one of those days that made you go, that was a day. Glad it's behind us, but glad to be here with you and our audience. That's always good.
It is. And
Like
we're
my
going to be talking about one of my favorite people. Well, maybe not people, my favorite Sister Serendipity. Oh my goodness. I'm in love with Sister Serendipity. So I'm glad to be chatting about her.
Well,
So,
we
and I
have
hear
some
you've got
stuff
like,
tonight.
you've got some research. You've actually like done some checking on this.
I have, and I'm coming late to the party because serendipity is a really important part of our modern world. And interestingly enough, most of us don't really realize how important it is. So, yeah, we're going to learn some stuff tonight, and hopefully we'll take away from it some good things. So, how would you define serendipity? If somebody, an ESL learner came up and said, "What is this word? What does it mean?"
It means when something good unexpectedly happens. You weren't expecting it, and then, oh, this clicked together with this. You met this person, and they said that they had this, and that's something exactly that you needed, or they knew somebody that had what you needed. And so that's kind of serendipity. You're talking to somebody, and they, oh, this is what you need. I know somebody can help you, or I can help you. That's serendipity.
You're very close to the originator of the word,
Oh,
where he came up with the word. Modern dictionary describes it as the faculty or phenomenon, and that's interesting that it says the faculty or phenomenon of finding valuable or agreeable things not sought after.
that's nice. Yeah, exactly. You
That's
weren't
pretty
planning on
simple,
it, and
right?
here it came to you. Yeah, that's good. I love it.
Yeah. So there's this idea, there was a movie called Serendipity, or a rom-com. People have seen that. A lot of people just think of it as something that happens that turns out to be good instead of bad. But the meaning is much bigger and more important to us for that. And one of the things, as I said, that really bring that home is that it was discovered or coined by Horace. What a great name, Horace Walpole.
Okay.
Mr. Walpole. And he was a member of Parliament, I think. And he coined it January 28th, 1754.
Woo!
I don't know
Nice.
how they determined that was the exact date he coined it. Well, I think I do know. He wrote it in a letter, actually. It wasn't published till 1833. And he formed the word out of a Persian fairy tale, The Three Princes of Serendip.
Interesting.
Never heard of it.
Serendip. Nice.
Yeah, an English version was published in 1722. Mr. Walpole was a learned English gentleman, so he probably would have been read this by his nanny when he was a young lad in short pants and ruffled shirt. And the heroes of the Princes of Serendip kept making discoveries by accident. They were sent out in the world by their father so they could become wise. They were already learned. They had already learned from books, but their father wanted them to become wise, so he sent them out in the world, and they encountered dangers and all sorts of things. And they got out of them, or they solved the problem by accident, or while looking for one thing, they found the solution in another way. And Serendip is an actual place, also called Serendib, and it's Ceylon, or modern day Sri Lanka, and that's where the story takes place. And so Walpole was looking for a coat of arms, some elements to add into a coat of arms, and his friend sent him a painting. And the painting arrived, and the painting didn't excite Walpole so much as there were elements in the frame that just struck him, and that was the answer for the elements of the coat of arms he was looking for. So he wrote back to his cousin, friend. There's different sort of renditions of the story, and he called it serendipity, that he had found the solution, as you said, or your definition, that the answer to something just sort of appears out of something else.
So, Scott, do you think if we start making up words, people will be using them 300 years later? Do you think that's going to happen?
Well, it does. Interestingly enough, there was a British show that we used to watch on TV, and it was called 8 out of 9 Cats. And
8 out of 9 cats.
8 out of 9 cats. Cats being a word for people in the 60s, I guess, but sort of a play on words. And it was a word game, basically. They had to find words in a mixed up scramble. And one of the hosts of the show was a word expert. And I forget what she has a name, or her profession has a name. And she was always talking about new words that were being coined. Often now they come out of social media in the same way that this did. He wrote a letter, it was recorded, and it was brought into the modern lexicon.
Nice.
There's a new one that I heard last week. Goblin state? Goblin mood? I'll have to research that, but it's when you're having sort of a purposefully messy and dirty day. I bet I can find that. I think it's called, I'll look it up for next week. Anyway, so maybe not you and I don't know how many, we invent words usually because we're mispronouncing them or having fun with them. You coined the acapellist, basically. Right?
That's true.
So and we still using that, although we bounced around some spellings of it just the day before yesterday, I think. But
yes, yeah. I think I finally, I agree that I've never seen it expressed as acapellist. It's always you sing a cappella, but never as acapellist. But then I was certainly not consistent with the spelling. But now we're going to follow the website protocol. We're going to spell it that way, and forevermore, that is how the acapellist shall be spelled.
Well, it's funny enough, when we were having that discussion, I went digging through things as I do, and 2 other people have started using that name since you. They're not the acapellist, but if you search acapellist, there's 2, one quite young gentleman and then one sort of 20-something-ish gentleman. Both of them, like you, sing, and unlike you, they don't seem to do a lot of radio or TV shows, internet shows and things. But yeah, so it's growing. Maybe in 40 years from now, it'll be an ordinary word. Boy, wasn't that an acapellas day or something?
Exactly. That sounds great. I love that will come.
I'm down with that if that happens, for sure. Yeah. So getting back to serendipity. Serendipity is a real thing. And I was really blown away by this. But do you know where serendipity is treated with the utmost respect and care?
Where serendipity, before I answer that, I'm going to ask you this question. You also said in the definition that you said, it was a like a capacity. Like there was 2 things you said. It was, read that definition again.
The faculty or phenomenon of finding valuable or agreeable things.
Faculty seems to be then they're suggesting, or that definition suggests that, hey, I got some input into this. It's something I develop, something, and is it just an awareness? Is it just that, is that, now that was a great answer, but that wasn't your question. What was your question again?
That was both a great answer, a great question, and kind of an answer. My question is, we sort of laugh, and there was a rom-com named Serendipity, but where is serendipity taken with the utmost seriousness, and it's treated with great respect?
I don't know. Where would that be?
Modern science.
Oh.
I was sorry.
Yeah. I see what you're saying. So there's an experiment that you're trying to find out this, and in that experiment, you don't find out this, but you find out that, which is even more important, that kind of a thing.
Some of the greatest discoveries in human history originated from serendipity. And putting little air quotes around that because we'll explain in a little bit how there's an active part of that, and you picked up on that when the definition said faculty. So it's not just this random sort of moment. And if we think of Archimedes and the whole buoyancy volume, remember he gets in his bath, water goes out, he screams eureka, runs out into the street. That required something that's very important. He had to recognize that advantageous thing that he had stumbled upon. And that's where and we'll get more into the definition. Psychology Today did a good article about it, but how serendipity is something that we can use and refine and develop in the way that we're able to recognize when there is something we've found that we can apply to somewhere we may not be looking for, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. I do
sorry?
Yeah, no, that makes really good sense. I get that.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it is just about kind of being there, being present, and being curious. And, oh, wait a minute, right? That kind of a thing. Cool.
Wow. Okay. Curiosity. That's a good one. And when I was searching this, I pulled out a whole bunch of research, and we can do a show just on curiosity and how curiosity is important for mental health and well-being and hope and all the things that you and I are into. Boy, curiosity did not kill that cat. Curiosity pole vaulted that critter into the stratosphere. So we'll talk about curiosity, but I'm combining what you're swathing, brother. Didn't you tell me that? Yeah, I worked that in there.
Hey, let me insert a little comment here too. Dr. Ron Friedman has this acronym he likes, COAL, COAL, which I've adopted as, it's not mine, but I love it. And basically it's curious, open, accepting, and loving. So that's what COAL is. And that was kind of his sort of, hey, this is, if we can operate in the world this way, this is a value, right? That you can be curious. You can be open to what people are telling you, be accepting of, all right, wow, that's an interesting perspective. Thank you for sharing that. Not judging it, not say, oh, you're an idiot, that kind of thing. And then in a loving way, try and garner, the benefits of what you've learned in this exchange, kind of a thing. Right. So yeah, cool.
Exactly right. And that's where we're at with serendipity, is you really have to be open with that. But there are institutes and research organizations completely dedicated. These are scientific. This is not like finding the UFOs in the desert kind of, which I'm not mocking. I'm down with those guys too. But this is like mainstream science and technology. People are trying to develop it into AI. They're trying to build apps to increase our ability to interpret serendipity. It's really serious business. For example, a measles outbreak in India caused poliomyelitis vaccine preparation to switch to African monkeys, leading Levine to discover the P53 tumor suppressor gene, which is really important in modern cancer science. Daguerre spent years trying to coat photographic images out of iodized silver plates. Failed again, like for the 538th time. In a huff, put the plates in a chemical cabinet where mercury had been spilt. Came in the morning and there was a perfect image on the plates. He was like blown away. It took him the rest of the day to figure out what the heck had happened. And that gave us modern photography. Can you imagine our world without images and photography?
Wow,
no, because of amazing. Spilled mercury, because he was in a huff and threw the plates in a cabinet because he had given up for the day. That's serendipity. And so many things. Modern penicillin, the whole Sir Alexander Fleming, he was on holidays, he came back, and the petri dishes that should have been washed weren't, and the penicillin ooze had killed the bacteria. But here's the crux. He was open to seeing something valuable where he wasn't looking. And when you look at all of these, there's probably millions of times that we've all had a chance to grow and gain from serendipity, but we didn't recognize something because we weren't looking for it.
Or we We were too fixated on this is the way it should be. And if it wasn't this way, it doesn't count. And then, oh, wait a minute, here's a different way that actually works. So yeah, cool.
Right. And that goes right into the Psychology Today article that we're going to read in there together in a little bit, talk about that I read, and we're going to talk about. That wasn't serendipity. That was just verbal stumblage going on in my part. Anyway, when you look through it, and then there's different kinds of serendipity, and they've actually classified. There's something called the Merton, MERTON archive, and they're sort of the go-to place for serendipity research. And Merton was a sociologist. He had an extensive network of colleagues that he worked with, and they were aware of his interest in serendipity, and they started to pool the resources together, and the Merton Institute, Merton Institute was founded, and crazy amount of stuff goes in there. And so there's different types of serendipity, and I won't go into them all because it gets rather heady, but it comes down to the different ways and the different outcomes that occur because of that serendipity. So they're named according to these types of serendipity. There, if somebody's really interested in it, you can I'll post the link to it. It's pretty complicated. It's pages and pages of taxonomy about how they came up with these different classifications and terms of serendipity. So it's real. It's a basis for a lot of modern science, and it's worth looking into if you're interested in it. So going back to it, though, getting back to where we were, most people just don't understand the scope of drugs, particularly in medicine. We talk about health a lot. Medicine, if you look at modern medicine, some of the arguments that were presented in the article I was just referring to say that without serendipity, modern medicine wouldn't exist in its current form. And that so often when a researcher sets out to find a result, and they're exactly as you said, Al, they're focused on the result must be here. If they're not willing to let go of that focus, they will completely miss the opportunity. And that example they gave is one of the biggest best-selling drugs of all time. Do you know what the best-selling drug of all time is?
Aspirin.
That's a good answer. Apparently not correct. Viagra. Viagra is the best-selling drug of all time, apparently.
Right.
Researchers in England in 1990 were doing research on hypertension and anti-angina. They were trying to find a drug for those two reasons. But their male subjects responded to their surveys saying that they had increased and prolonged erections. And one of the team or a number of the team said, hey, we're onto something here. This is a big problem. Why don't we change our focus and look at this drug for use in that area? And since 1990, it's worldwide. It's been copied. It's been, cloned. It's been used for so many different things. And that's just an example of where it was a really serious focus, involved a whole team of scientists. They were doing massive research. Had they not been willing, because that's a pretty far thing, right? You're researching hypertension and angina, and you come up with, Viagra.
I like to think of this guy going home to his wife and say, honey, you know how I've been studying this for the angina and reducing these pain for people for 20 years. Good news. Not going to help with that at all, but hallelujah, I can help people get erections. I wonder how that conversation went.
Well, but it does show the mental gymnastics that are required to make serendipity work for you, right? And the point, so much of what I read really came down to the point that serendipity is always around us. There are always answers around us, but so often we're closed off to them. And I like your coal example, that we absolutely just miss that opportunity. And it doesn't present itself again because we've completely blocked ourselves off to the possibility of it existing. And that's when we start getting into the realm of mental health and trauma and the things that we talk about a lot. So we're getting the idea that serendipity is something that really has an active participatory. It takes action.
Participatory, I believe would be how you pronounce it.
Yeah. It takes action on our part as sentient beings to be open and to recognize. And that's where software designers and system engineers are really getting into, trying to create AI and computer programs and models that will help us recognize when a solution has been found, but not in the place we're looking. Or, you know, it's such an amazing faculty in us when we can recognize a solution for a problem that maybe is not the one we were trying to solve. And, you know, I think of when I was in school, I was always criticized by my math teacher for being a mathematician. And I really like, mathematician. Yeah, Mr. Forsyth, if you're out there, I'm not homeless living on the street. You were wrong. I did go to university and passed, and I'm doing okay. Thanks. Yeah, he hated me because I had a lot of fun finding the answer, but inventing ways to find the answer, and that drove him crazy because in his mind there was one way to find the answer, the right way.
Got it. Yeah.
And to me, it was a fun game. Numbers were this mutable thing that you could just move around and change and play with. It wasn't until I took my 4th year religious studies methods and concept course with an advanced mathematician called Dr. Woods, who is an amazing person, taught and studied at University of South Africa. I'm sorry, Dr. Woods, if I've mislabeled you, and at the University of Lethbridge in the advanced mathematics department and the religious studies department, interestingly enough. And he started our course by saying, if you believe in mathematics, you have to believe in God. He said, that's an interesting statement because I'm a mathematician and I don't believe in God. But if you believe in mathematics, you have to believe in God, because at some level, advanced mathematics is no different than religion. And it requires faith. And you believe that this is true. And everything around you points that this is true, but there's no way to express that in a physical way, which, and I'm sorry, I'm hacking up his theory. It's quite an advanced and brilliant theory, but that's the gist of it.
Nice.
So serendipity involves that concept of maybe not being able to explain how you found the answer or why you think it's an answer, but applying that as a solution to something that's occurring around you or near you or in you.
So you're probably going to get into this, but when you made that comment, it kind of makes me think of serendipity having a pretty strong linkage to intuition.
Yes. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That wait a second, this is a direction that kind of, that the insight comes to you. And if you dampen it down and ignore it and, I'm doing this, not, but if you're open to it, it's like, oh, wait a second, that's cool.
Yeah. When I was looking through the computer people, that's a terrible term for a lot of advanced fields of study. But when the computer geeks and freaks were looking at serendipity, they came down to 2 things. The human beings have to remain receptive, 1, and 2, willing to act on it. And without either of those things, then there is no serendipity. It's just stuff going on.
Right.
But if you're open to it and willing to act on it, and that's key, you have to say, aha, and do something with it. Archimedes had to not just mop up the water he'd spilt on his floor and go about his daily business. He had to connect that to volume and determining whether the king's crown was gold or whether they cheated and put lead in it. Like, he had to actively make that connection. Then he had to drop his theories and he had to make it work. So serendipity is not like winning the lottery, but it's like winning the lottery. Right. So we have to actually make the solution happen. which I thought was a pretty cool way of explaining it. And the computer people that are trying to design for it said that it's really interesting because how the problem is when you try and create serendipity, then you're predetermining the outcome. And as soon as you do that, it's not serendipitous anymore.
Right.
Right. It's just
Right.
creativity. So I thought that was an interesting oxymoron on what was happening there. Let me just, I'm changing things. So let me bring up my other notes. I want to call, we're getting on time here. So I'm going to hit the big one that I want to talk about.
All
And
right.
that's how hope and serendipity work together and why it's important in terms of mental health. So this comes from an article from Psychology Today, which we pull a lot out of, and Psychotherapy and Assessment Services of Dr. Tamara Black and Associates. And it's a very interesting article. I'm combining two of them here. And it talks about how in psychotherapy, when the doctors are looking for opportunities to help people recover from traumatic events, from all sorts of disorders, it talks about how recovery and relief are key goals, but to achieve them, the practitioners have to instill hope or help the patient find hope. And Dr. Black, Tamara Black, her last name, yes, Dr. Black, expresses that as people that are suffering from those things are in a really barren place. Like if you were to imagine somebody who's suffered severe trauma or all sorts of mental conditions, they're really wandering in a barren landscape, and they're lost, and they're desperate to find some relief from that dry, empty, barren, lonely space. And I really love the imagery that she uses to explain this, because it really helps us understand. Although, as you said, most of us have experienced trauma, maybe we've never walked alone in that barren wasteland that people who have severe conditions are really dealing with. And so she talks about how hope is the tool that practitioners have, and what a role serendipity plays in instilling that hope. And what the practitioner wants to do is talk about and help the patient think about what could be over the horizon. So where they are right now is a very barren, lonely, painful place. But once they start thinking about what could be over the horizon, what possibilities are over the horizon, that's the first step to recovery and relief. And she talks about both and the importance of both, and that there's not always, recovery may not be possible, but relief may be possible.
Yeah.
Right.
That makes good sense. I mean, if you're focused on there's nothing I can do, this is just shitty and it's going to happen forever and I have no control over it, that kind of thing. But at the point you change from, hey, there's a possibility this could get better. There's a possibility. Once you change to that, then I can see serendipity saying, come along, brother. I know the way, right? That, that's why I see this happening. Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, and that's exactly right. So, she talks about how you have to, person in that situation, and all of us really, like I've had a crappy day today. What do? Lay down in the corner and cry, maybe for 10 minutes before the show. But no, kidding, joking. But
it'd be okay,
no,
Scott. It'd be okay if you did.
It would be okay.
Right.
Yeah, it would. Okay. And I do cry. Sad movies and sad songs always make me cry. But country songs, man, gets me right here all the time. Anyway, but you have to keep putting one foot in front of the other, right? And you have to have that perseverance. And people that are out in that mental wasteland, that's their only hope.
Yeah.
Like they need to keep moving towards the horizon. And she talks about what happens is generally you remember how you failed in the past, and you remember how you tried to get out of it and it didn't work. And you've done, how many times have we all said, I did everything I could and nothing worked? We've all said that.
Sure.
But if you're somebody suffering, that becomes a trap.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
your mind goes back and it remembers, I tried to go back again. I tried to apologize. I tried to, ask for forgiveness. I tried to stand strong. All the things you've tried, and nothing has worked. And your mind focuses on all the attempts you've made to get out of that place. And she said, and the article in Psychology Today both agree that that's a trap that our minds create for us, because
Mhm.
you start thinking about having a limited faculty to move forward. And there comes
Mhm.
that great word again. I have
Faculty.
used all of my facilities to attempt to get free
Mhm.
from this terrible place.
Mhm.
And that's when serendipity comes in and provides answers that we weren't looking for, or we
Mhm.
didn't think were possible,
Mhm.
or creates Viagra when we were looking for blood pressure medicines.
Mhm.
And maybe we think the path out is to the north, but serendipity really tells us it's back the way we came.
Yeah.
And, and,
Cool.
and once we start to believe that serendipity is all around us, and it really just takes us to recognize it, to be open and committed to taking action when we see it, that gives us hope. And once we have hope, we can put one foot in front of the other. We can keep moving forward in that wasteland, brother. We can keep struggling and fighting. And sorry.
No, that's okay. So Dr. Black, you're you're
Yeah,
you're restating Dr.
I'm
Black's work. That.
paraphrasing
Yep.
her statement. Her research is in that, and she talks about how our minds are like a camera, and I love this. And so when you take a picture, and I've done projects like this in the art world and in social research. When you take a picture, there's the main subject, right? But the camera catches all the stuff in the background.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's all there. And our minds are like that. Like when I'm struggling with trauma, I might be focused on the thing that caused the trauma, but my brain actually remembers all the stuff in the background.
Mhm. Mhm.
And science has told us in all of recorded history that in that background, serendipity is working and there is a solution there.
Mhm.
We just
Yep.
have to recognize it and we have to act on it.
That's
And I
beautiful.
found that to be such a powerful image, right?
It is. Do you think, Scott, you've heard about us being energy beings, right? And we control to, or we influence to a large degree the vibration that we operate at. And like hate is like, 50 or something, and love is 1,000, and the variations between, right?
Right.
That kind of a thing. And do you think that maybe part of it being open to serendipity is being at a higher vibration, a higher level of energy kind of a thing, right? Do you think that that might be part of it too? If you're too low here, that it just, you can't see it, you can't recognize it.
I think that's absolutely true. But according to a lot of the research I read and a lot of the statements by mental health experts and researchers, is that all of us have the capability to be open to new things. That's inherent in the human condition.
Mm-hmm.
It takes will to close your mind.
Mm. Yep.
So I agree with what you're saying, but I think we're not limited to that level. I think that there's one little thing that we need to do, and that's not learning something, it's unlearning something, which is
Mm-hmm.
sometimes harder, right?
Yes.
It's to look at the background instead of focusing on the face in the middle, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. And also, I guess as well, being that the social things that people tell you it's impossible, can't be done, that kind of a thing, that if you're having the insight it can be done, that you follow that insight, you follow that. Tara Brock has this lovely story that I might have even told her before. There's this girl, and she's in the classroom, and she's painting in the art class in the classroom. She's like 5 years old, and the teacher comes up and says, "Hey, Sarah, what are you painting?" And Sarah, she doesn't look up from her work. She just keeps on, doing her stuff, and she says, "Oh, I'm painting God." And the teacher says, "Well, honey, like nobody knows what God looks like." And she doesn't even look up from her work. She says, "Well, they will in a couple minutes." I love that story.
That's wonderful, and that's, that ties right in with the next part of what Dr. Black is saying, and that's not to be afraid of your future.
Mm,
In our minds, we often fail future, and the risk of failure is higher than the real risk,
mm,
and that's so true for so many of us, is that we imagine the risk to be much greater than it is. If you've ever watched a horror movie or a science fiction horror genre, you'll know that once they show the monster, it's never as scary. When the
yeah.
monster's just out of sight, when you just can't quite see, our mind runs away with us and creates all sorts of horrible images that cut us right to the core of fear. But
Hmm.
once you see the monster, no matter how good the special effects are, no matter how good the costuming and lighting is, part of you goes, it's not that scary, right? And that's what they're talking about here, is that in the short term, we often avoid risks,
Right.
and we do that because we imagine that we don't have a choice, or we imagine that we're going to fail. And what we're really doing is cheating ourselves out of using serendipity to find a solution, and to move forward. And I think that's a great point. And when you look at if you look at the human experience, we have proven again and again that serendipity, that answers that we're not looking for, are all around us.
Hmm. Hmm.
If you look at science, if you look just at the field of health science, the solutions, the breakthroughs, the amazing fields that we've developed simply because somebody saw a mistake and saw it not as a mistake but as a solution, maybe not to what they were researching, maybe not to the problem they were trying to solve, but they saw it as a solution and they took action, is proof that any of us can do the same thing, that we're
You,
surrounded by serendipity.
you know what it makes me think of is sticky notes, right? The sticky notes, right?
Yeah.
The glue failed, but then, oh, wait a minute, this is nice that it would stick on here and you can move it again, right? So it wasn't something that was planned. It was like, oh, isn't that a serendipitous event? I found out that this will work, right? So cool.
Yeah. And they're talking about here that what you have to do is really having hope is not about feeling obligations or ignoring them, right? And often we're weighed down by obligations, and part of that obligation is that sense that I've tried everything, I've done everything I could, nothing's worked. Our mind will play back our failures in an endless loop to us,
Yep. Yep. Yep.
right?
Yep. You're
and
entirely right. Yeah.
and like, when we're little, that stops us from putting our hands on the hot stove, because we learn really young that bright red things usually hurt when we touch them, so we don't. So it's part of survival. But
But
it,
speaking of bright red things, we both have red backgrounds. We didn't like coordinate this or nothing,
no,
but that's not
I
bad.
was that caught me earlier too. I'm like, that's interesting. Al and I are both red backgrounds tonight.
How do you
So
like my lighting, by the way?
very good. I like it a lot. Much better. Much
Thank
better.
you, Scott and Michelle, for getting me this light here. Yeah, that's nice. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks really good. I've got the usual problem with my lighting, but I'll have that fixed. I keep hoping. So yeah, going back to it, is that it's really important that we embrace what's going on, and realize that a better life is possible,
Nice.
and that everything we've tried is not the sum of our options. And even if we can't imagine a solution, or we don't believe that we have a faculty to change the situation, that it has been proven again and again there is something beyond our control that puts solutions in front of us, if we
Hmm.
can, or beside us, or around us. And sometimes you have to look around. That's part of the process, right?
Yeah.
um, and Dr. Black really puts it together, and says, put on your hopeful glasses, give yourself a chance to believe and hope, even for a little bit, that from fresh view and a fresh perspective, that serendipity can provide answers in places you haven't or don't think of looking. um, Life begins to change, and life
Mm.
begins to look better.
Yeah.
And through that lens of hope, we start to create optimism, even little bits of optimism. And by creating that, we create ripples that move out and affect those around us, and they affect ourselves, and it affects our thinking, and that internal dialogue starts to change. And I think everyone can think of situations where, and that's where the rom-com Serendipity is all about, is where things that seem to be meant to be don't work out, but then things keep occurring that make something else work out,
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've all experienced that. And if we can remember that when we're feeling lost in that wilderness, and we can let serendipity into our lives and recognize it and act on it, we're not going to be out in that wilderness alone. We're going to find a path out of there, and we're going to create and grow and be happier and healthier for it.
That is beautiful. That is beautiful. I'm going to suggest, Scott, as well, that Sister Serendipity, she's lovely, but she also has another sister that comes with her, Sister Synchronicity. Those two seem to like to play together. You know what I'm saying? And so that seems to be, if you get both of them kicking in, things really start to happen a little quicker, right? So,
how would you describe synchronicity? I think I'm with you, but how would you describe that?
just that basically where things align when you weren't planning them. So I guess the distinction I have, serendipity is something occurs that you weren't planning on that is a favorable outcome. And then synchronicity is when things align to give you the opportunity to access on that serendipitous event. You met this person at this time and this thing happened, right? Oh my goodness. Then, it all kind of clicked together, right? I guess the other thing too is that, you're convinced a solution exists, right? That there is a solution always. And maybe it's going to be tomorrow, or maybe it's going to be 10 years from now, but a solution will arise, and just have to be open to when that does occur, right? That when that manifests and shows to you, hey, here's a different way. Look at this. Look at the difference you can make with this. So
one of the things that came out of it was a discussion about President Kennedy and the moon mission, and how there wasn't really the means or the method, but a whole nation became hopeful that they could put a human being on the moon, and they succeeded in that. Unless you believe it was done on a soundstage in Paramount movies. But the idea that when you target hope in a really broad way, that you find solutions. It's when you narrow it down, when you constrain hope, when you constrain serendipity, when you constrain your own creativity and resilience, that you miss opportunities.
Yeah.
And I really like that idea that when you broadcast hope out there, and in a really general way, and you remain open to things that'll move you forward, that really anything is possible at the level of individuals, communities, families, nations, species. And that gives us great hope for so many outcomes.
Definitely. And I love your camera analogy that Dr. Black shared, because that's, if you're only focused on this and you don't see all this, well, then like you only have the opportunity. Either this works or it doesn't, but the solution might be right there, just outside your focal point of your camera might be the solution exists there if you're open to taking that in. And we don't recognize how powerful we can, how aware we are and what we know, right? Like what I'm thinking of is people who are, they go under hypnosis, right? And they replay event, and they have all these details that if you just talk to them on the end, they say, I talked to Susan and she wore a red dress, and that was all they knew. And then when they're, oh, look, there was all this and this happened and that, it's much more, the picture is much more fulsome, right? The details are there and the answers are there in those details.
Perfect example tonight. When you and I turned on our cameras, our minds were instantly aware of the background colors and everything in the frame, but our conscious caught up to them about the same time, because when you said it, I had just thought, oh, that's interesting, we're both red backgrounds tonight. And that proves how we took it all in. Like, I didn't suddenly look at your background, I'd already seen it.
Right.
But then my mind said, hey, did you notice Al's background's red too. Why did you choose red tonight? You know, like I looked through a dozen pictures and I picked the red one because I don't know, I felt like red tonight. And I really think that looking through all of this, I do believe more than just sort of a corny story, that serendipity is spread through every fiber of everything we do. And as many questions as there are, there's answers. And there's an old Chinese proverb, and I can't do it justice, but basically it's for every answer there's a question, meaning that there's no chicken or egg, that there is an answer for every question. And sometimes we see the answer and sometimes we see the question, but they can be swapped because they're, as you said, they're synchronous. They go together.
Yes.
Sometimes we just can't see the answer for the question, and sometimes we can't see the question for the answer.
Yes.
But they exist, right?
Cool. That's great.
And I've always thought that was a great way to think about things. And sometimes when I get troubled, I remind myself, am I looking at the question or am I looking at the answer? And sometimes we just need to slow ourselves down, I think, and say, you know, let's just consider our perspective on this, because I think your point of levels is really good, right? Your perspective from up here is very different from down here, and levels are not necessarily a score, right? We hear that and we think, oh, if I'm low, that means I've scored differently. But if you're an artist, sometimes crawling on the ground gives you a wonderful perspective that you could never get standing up.
Very good point. Very good point.
Right.
Do you think, Scott, that Beatles song, Mother Mary comes to me, seeking words of wisdom, let it be. Do you think Mother Mary is serendipity? Are they the same?
It could be. I've never analyzed the song that way, but I do think that music could be the language of the gods. Like, I think the answer to everyone I've ever talked to, if you talk to them long enough, they will tell you how some song solved some problem in their life that they thought there was no solution to, right? Or some pain, or some, like, music and song has an amazing resonance with people at levels that I don't even understand, like crazy.
And forever, like, you know, if you look back at every civilization that existed, how important music and dance, for that matter, you know, were to the celebration, were to the, you know, getting prepared to do the hunt or to do the battle, getting, you know, the everything kind of revolved around that. Is how you express, that's how you use your voice to kind of say, hey, I'm here, and here's, you know, here's my tribe, and here's the difference I'm making, and here's how I'm part of this, right? So I think
that's really interesting, because with some very, very, very specific limited exceptions, every civilization that I've read about or heard of may not have written language or communication. They may not allow visual or iconographic, or, you know, like, you don't write the name of God if you're Muslim, those things. But there's, with except for a very, very few, oral tradition or oral sharing of history and culture and language is uniform throughout human existence, as far as we know. I mean, it existed far, far before written history. You know, and we look at the civilizations of the past, and it was quite clear that they had verbal communication. And one can assume, by our, you know, finding instruments, and ever since we've been able to bang things together and make a rhythm or grunt, I assume that we've had some form of music. So yeah, I think that I think forces like serendipity, which have been with us forever, music, those things are yet an undiscovered planet in many ways. People talk about how the oceans of the earth, you know, we've mapped the stars, but we have basically no knowledge of most of the water surface on the planet below, I forget the certain level. We just have no idea what's there. We guess, but we can't go there. Our instruments can't go there. And I always think that that's a great, I can never remember if it's a metaphor or an allegory for the human mind, right? Like, there's so much that we've spent so much time researching and studying, just a tiny little bit on the surface. but there's this whole amazing part that we know is there, just like the depths of the ocean. We know it's there, but we don't know how to get to it or how to study it or communicate with it.
I got to tell you, I feel closer to serendipity because of our talk. So, I'm going to embrace and invite serendipity to come hang out with me, and synchronicity. Come on too. We're going to move together, and then life will be good. We'll figure out, we'll make our most fulsome contribution, me and serendipity and sister synchronicity and brother Scott Sweetman. Altogether.
Just those two things: recognize, be open to it, and be willing to embrace it. So open and act, those two things will get you out of the wasteland. And if they won't get you out, they'll get you some relief, just knowing that there are solutions that your history hasn't found. And we're so many times we're held by our history.
Yes, I agree. Scott, what do we have for next week? What are we going to talk about next week?
Oh, next week, we're going to talk about happiness scores. There's going to be a little survey that'll be on your page and my page in the Acapellist. And we're going to talk about happiness scores and really, what does it mean? And what do our viewers and our friends and the people we interact with, how do they define what counts for them in terms of happiness? So look for that probably by the weekend. To show up on our social media and the Acapellist page, a little survey for you to fill out, and then we're going to talk about it, and then there'll be a final survey during our show to let people tell us whether they're happy or not based on their own definition of that. So,
that sounds exciting.
Yeah, because on the news we hear a lot about happiness scores and the happiest country and the happiest cities. Yeah, well, we're going to break that down. We're going to bring that home, and we're going to say what makes us happy, what counts for us here at H3 headquarters.
Nice. At the palatial H3 headquarters. Yes, exactly. All right, Scott, wrap us up. Take us home there, buddy.
From my friend, the Acapellist Alan Friesen, and myself, Scott Sweetman, here at H3, thanks for joining us tonight. And we'll be back next Thursday live right here on Just TV. Join us then.
Get 'em, Matson.